In my freshman year of college, I visited home a week before. Halloween, the county fair was in town, so one night I took my little sister and her two friends, who were in middle school. The fair was fall and Halloween themed, so there was a haunted house. I had been to the fair a bunch of times, but I had never been allowed to go in there. Naturally, I tried to convince my little sister and her friends to go through it with me. They were too scared by all the bloody psycho looking actors lurking outside, so I had to go along with them on all the same boring rides until eventually they got hungry. I was the only one with money, so I was able to convince them to go through the haunted house with me by promising to buy them all whatever food they wanted. Afterwards, we got in line together, and I was immediately feeling the unsettling vibes of the haunted house. I couldn't help but feel like all the scare actors were staring at me. But my little sister and her friends were already terrified, so I hid the fact that I was uncomfortable. It took us about 20 minutes of waiting for everyone to go in one by one. But then, when we reached the front, the girls wanted to back out. However, I managed to make a deal with the girl that was letting people through that I would go in first and then come back around to prove it was okay. And whoever was behind them could go through ahead of them until they were ready. After settling things, I entered the haunted house alone, finding myself lost in a dark, claustrophobic maze of narrow hallways filled with fake smoke. The only lighting came from the obvious spots where some guy with a chainsaw or machete would jump out. I got scared once or twice, but it wasn't that bad, as the actress would usher me forward right after then. As I was going down the longest stretch of hallway, I was suddenly shoved from my right. I was caught off guard and tumbled to my left, collapsing to the floor, just as a door slammed shut. I was sealed off in total darkness. I wasn't sure if this was still part of the experience, so I quietly asked if anyone was there. A voice that sounded like an old woman asked in reply, "Can I borrow your shirt?" I freaked out and instantly got back on my feet. I reached for my phone to use the flashlight, but when I looked around, I realized I was in a tiny storage room filled with nothing but mannequins. They were all pointed to look at me in the center of the room, and half of them were wearing costumes like the scare actors, while the rest were completely bare. I couldn't see the exit or the woman, so I shouted at her to show herself. That's when she said, audibly smiling, "Check your eyes, dear, I'm right here." I snapped around to look at where the voice came from. She stood among the mannequins, as pale as their plastic skin, but wrinkled and sagging. She wore nothing on the top half of her body but a lacy red bra. I asked her who she was, but as I was speaking to her, the door behind me quickly opened and shut again. I turned around again to look in that direction, unable to see anything, as the woman kept talking to me. She said, "My son says I should cover up because I'm too old. But you, on the other hand." I knew I was no longer alone in the room with this woman. There could have been any number of people lurking behind the mannequins, but my phone's flashlight was too useless to reveal them, no matter how much I spun around, looking finally. However, I was able to find the door I had fallen through. Just as I heard the first footsteps around me, I screamed and ran for it. I managed to get the door open with my left hand, but somebody grabbed my other wrist and started to pry my phone away. I turned to them and kicked as hard as I could. They staggered back, but in my rush to claw my way out through the door, I dropped my phone. I didn't have time to care. I just ran right outside the door. I collided straight into someone. We scared the out of each other before I realized he was just a regular person going through the haunted house. But I didn't linger. I shoved him out of the way and started sprinting back to the front. The actors kept yelling at me to stop going the wrong way, but I ignored them all. Finally, I came out the front entrance and started yelling at the attendant that something was horribly wrong. Sadly, she just looked at me like I was crazy. I realized everyone was gawking at me, trying to hold back their laughter, as they thought I'd gone hysterical after getting scared by the haunted house. Then I noticed my sister and her friends were gone. I shook the attendant until she told me that one of the actors had scared them off. Then I went looking for them, frantically. I was scared to death. They had been grabbed by the same people. But then I found them at a food truck. I asked them what they were doing there, and they said the man inside was giving them free churros. I could tell by the smile on that creepy old sicko's face that there was something sinister going on with him too. I ripped them all away and took them home. They complained the whole way, but I wasn't going to risk being there for another second to this day. Nobody fully believes me when I tell them what happened that night. Even I sometimes catch myself wondering if the whole thing really happened the way I remember it, but I know better. That fair group is full of creeps who come to town to prey on women and girls like that perverted old woman and her psychotic son and that man in the food truck, luring them in with free treats. The rest of the employees are just enablers who work to isolate the victims and turn a blind eye to what happens to them. Life is truly filled with horror stories. These traumatic events leave many people with severe and life-altering injuries. But even after the trauma, the struggle isn't over. Have you ever thought about what you would do after you got injured if you had medical bills to pay, but no ability to work? How would you know that your insurance companies or the people responsible for your injuries are being fair to you? Then trying to navigate the situation with traditional law firms can be a daunting, confusing ordeal that brings even more pain. The piles of paperwork, the hours of your valuable time used up, and the expensive fees hitting you while you're already down with Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. That won't be a problem. When you're seriously hurt, your injury could be worth millions. Morgan & Morgan don't accept lowball settlements from insurance companies. In recent months, they've achieved massive victories for victims of serious car crashes in Florida. They achieved a verdict for $12 million, which was 34 times greater than the highest insurance offer in Philadelphia. They achieved a verdict for a $26 million payout, 40 times more than the highest settlement offered by the insurance company. Morgan & Morgan will fight for you to get the best outcome if you become their client. If you hire Morgan & Morgan, you won't just be assigned a single lawyer, but an entire dedicated legal team with lawyers, case investigators, paralegals, and customer care specialists, all working to maximize your settlement. On top of that, there are thousands of support staff available at all hours to help you with any questions or concerns about your case, making the experience as painless as possible. The best part is, you don't pay them a penny unless you win your case, and Morgan & Morgan didn't become the largest injury law firm for no reason. It's because they win a lot, even better. They've modernized the injury law process so it only takes minutes to see if you have a case, and you can submit your claim on your phone. If you ever get seriously injured, your case could be worth millions, and you're only a few clicks away from potentially changing your life. It's easy. You can start your claim with Morgan and Organ at www.forthepeople.com/MJV, found in the description below, or by scanning the QR code on screen. With your phone's camera, you can type in your name, phone number, zip code, and email address. Select the type of your claim, then describe what happened. Click or tap, start your claim, and you're done. Remember, Morgan & Morgan is the largest injury law firm in the United States, so they have all the resources and know-how to see your case through. There's no company too big for Morgan & Morgan to fight, and they'll fight for you to get the settlement you deserve if you become their client. When I was a freshman in college, I was still living in my rather small hometown. I hadn't decided on my major, but my passion was in theater. However, the school didn't have much of a theater program, and outside of that, there were few, if any, acting opportunities in town. Then one day I saw a flyer calling for volunteer scare actors for the haunted house at the upcoming fall festival. Obviously, I jumped on the opportunity, even though it wasn't a paid gig. In the weeks prior, I went out to rehearse my role. It was a super low budget operation inside a small warehouse, and the entire haunted house was a set put together with paper-thin walls. I was meant to be a vampire, but unfortunately, not a genuinely scary-looking one, but a classic Dracula-style vampire. I was supposed to jump out at people from my hiding spot, do some vampiric hissing and screaming while baring my vampire teeth, then reset for the next group. It felt really cheesy, and I didn't expect it to scare anyone over the age of 10. But with the makeup and prosthetics, I was sure nobody would recognize me. So, I decided to go all out. On the night of the festival, the crowd was a lot bigger than I expected. So, I knew I was in for a long night. Inside the haunted house, people were coming every 30 seconds, non-stop for hours. A lot of them weren't that scared by me, but most people were startled. At least some did act genuinely afraid. However, others just laughed at me. None were worse than these two douchebags I saw about halfway through the night. They seemed about my age, but they were piss drunk. They laughed at me hysterically when I jumped out at them. But it got much worse than that. I was about to retreat into my hiding spot when one of them recognized me and called me by my name. That's when I realized they went to my school. I tried to play it off in character and say there was nobody there by that name. That only made them laugh even harder. I had to break character and ask them to move on. So, the next group didn't run into them, but as soon as I got serious with them, their attitudes changed instantly. They started stepping towards me, raising their voices, and threatening to kick my ass. If I ever told them what to do again, I tried to apologize and explain why I asked them to move, but that didn't go over well either. These guys started to criticize me for wanting to be an actor, making extremely homophobic remarks about the types of men that wanted to be in theater. They were seriously pissing me off. And when I saw the next group of people walking towards us, I finally had enough. I yelled at them to leave or they would be removed, but they only listened because there were other people watching. They walked off, staring daggers at me and talking under their breath. But at least they were gone. The rest of the night went along after that, and it was very busy the entire time. By the time it was over, my voice was completely shot from the hours of constant hissing and screaming. Then at last, I heard that we were getting our final guests of the night. I listened for their approach, but it was eerily quiet. The other actors were completely failing to get a reaction. I found out why when I heard them getting close to me. Then I jumped out and screamed one last time. I froze when I saw the same two from before standing in front of me. This time they were so drunk they couldn't even stand up straight, and they were grinning with pure evil joy. The one on the left pulled a stick out from his waistband. It had been sharpened to a point like a wooden stake. He said to me that they had to come back properly armed to kill a vampire. Then he looked to his buddy and asked if he was supposed to put it through my heart. But the other one shook his head and said, "It should go in much, much lower." The one with the stake said that was disgusting. But if that's what vampires wanted, then that's what he would do. He tried to step back and say something, but I didn't even get a chance before they lunged at me. One of them got me in a headlock and covered my mouth while the other dragged me by my legs into my hiding spot. They drew the curtain and took me to the ground as I tried to fight back, but I couldn't break free or even make a sound. All I could do was try to kick them away as the one with the stick tried to rip off my costume. He told the other one to squeeze my neck tighter so I would stop fighting, and I immediately felt the pressure cutting off the circulation to my brain. My legs flailed as I looked at these two monsters just waiting for me to pass out. But then, in my struggle, my foot bumped into the wall. I heard the hollow sound and remembered how thin they were. So I turned my leg to the side and kicked straight through it. They tried to grab my legs and stop me, but by then, the next actor had already seen what was happening. They started calling for help as my attackers tried to escape, but they were caught trying to leave the building soon after the cops at the festival arrived. I expected those animals to be arrested, but the cops just let them go, saying it was only a practical Halloween joke, as if I was being dramatic about what those monsters were trying to do to me. I see these two at school almost every day now, and they are always smiling at me like psychopaths. They know they got away with it, and they know they could do it again if they wanted to. Before they get another chance, I'll be getting the hell out of there. My original plan was to get my bachelor's degree at home. But as soon as I get an associate's degree, I'm transferring, so I'll never have to see their faces again. I was 19 when I broke up with my boyfriend of 3 years. He was abusive during our entire relationship, and when I finally managed to end things, he left me traumatized and took all my friends with him. In my freshman year of college, I got in with an entirely new group of friends who didn't have any connections with my ex to my knowledge. At the start of our sophomore year, one of my new friends got their first apartment. Once we were settled in for the new semester, they finally planned their housewarming party in mid-October. By then, the local amusement park had started their annual Halloween event, so they had everyone get tickets to it for the day after the party. In fact, the entire party was Halloween themed, which I absolutely hated. I had always been easy to scare, especially while still recovering from years of abuse. So I was the opposite of thrilled when they put on a horror movie. I had to sit through the entire thing while basically hiding under a blanket. Unfortunately, when that one was finished, they put on another. I tried to convince everyone to watch something else, but it seemed like nobody wanted to listen to me. So I figured I only had one option to get through the night: drink ahead of everyone else, until I was drunk enough to pass out on the couch. It worked, but my nightmares were filled with demons and murderers trying to kill me and torture me. Then I woke up with the worst hangover of my life. My head was pounding. I was nauseous, anxious, throwing up and sweating out all the water. I tried to drink, my friends, just let me suffer through it. But they also dragged me out to a diner for a late breakfast. The smell of their food was enough to make me gag, so, unsurprisingly, I wasn't able to get anything down at this point. I was dreading the Halloween event, but I couldn't find a way to tell anyone. I didn't want to go, especially because someone else had paid for my ticket. I felt like I was forced into the park that night. Then, before we could even get in line for a haunted house, some psycho with a chainsaw ran up on us. We all screamed, but everyone else was quickly laughing it off while I was still fighting off a panic attack. Unfortunately, things didn't get better in the relative safety of the line into the first haunted house. I started catching glimpses of someone, like I was being haunted. I kept seeing my ex-boyfriend in the park, peeking around corners and standing among moving crowds of people. Whenever I went to look at him, he disappeared. One of my friends noticed that I was still freaking. So, when they said something, I asked them if they had seen my ex around. They just laughed and said, "That was ridiculous." Something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me. But I couldn't be sure of anything. We were approaching the front of the line rapidly, and before I knew it, the 5 of us were plunged into the horrors of the haunted house. Freaks were jumping out at us, left and right, screaming about killing us and ripping us apart. I stayed in the middle of the group and looked down at the ground the entire time. Eventually, we entered a small metal room. There was blood everywhere, and a torture chair in the middle, guarded by a masked man holding a circular bone saw. Instead of chasing after us, he started talking, only to ask which one of us we would like to see cut open. I could barely comprehend what was happening before I heard giggling. Then the girls behind me pushed me to the front. I stumbled straight into the masked freak as he revved the saw in my face. I screamed and ran away, but I was trapped in the room with them. I backed myself into a corner, begging for them to stop, but then I felt something familiar. A hand laid across my shoulder and squeezed. I looked back to see my ex-boyfriend standing behind me. He was smiling as he reached to put his arms around me. I fell to the ground, instantly scrambling back toward the group as I screamed at the top of my lungs and pointed to the corner. Everyone just looked at me like I was insane and said, "Nobody was there, I thought they were screwing with me." But when I looked again, he was gone. I heard everyone start to laugh, but I noticed an emergency exit and ran away. I got led out into some random part of the park where I found a small alley to hide. My friends were blowing up my phone, laughing and asking if I was schizophrenic or something. I ignored them all and called my mom to pick me up and take me home that night. I had the same horrible nightmares as the previous night, only this time all my new friends were watching me scream for help and just standing there laughing at me. At one point, to my nightmares, I was killed. My eyes shot open, but I couldn't move for a few seconds. I couldn't breathe either. All I could see was my ex-boyfriend crawling through my bedroom window. I finally caught my breath and screamed as loud as I could. The next thing I remember is my dad bursting into the room. But my ex was gone, and the window was only open by an inch. I don't know if I blacked out from fear and didn't remember him leaving, or if it was just another nightmare. It's been a few months, and I don't associate with any of those people anymore. However, I still wonder what really happened, to be honest. I don't know if they actually set me up like that or if I just let them stress me out to the point that I had a mental breakdown. One thing that's strange to me is that my ex had been persistently trying to reach out to me for months, but then he stopped that same night. All I know is I won't let people treat me like that anymore, and I won't go into another haunted house for the rest of my life.